this room knows who I am, so I'm going to go through the things since we're recording. I'm Karen Jackson, Category Manager, and pleased to introduce our next presenter from Wells Blue Bunny. With a solutions-oriented approach and a love for analytically driven collaborative growth, Jeff Mullum brings 20 years of CPG experience and category management leadership at General Mills, King Arthur Baking, and Wells Enterprises to his Category Development Manager 2 role in frozen treats category. Jeff lives in the Kansas City area with his wife and 4 young children, who thinks his job consists of sitting in an office with the door locked, eating bomb pops and ice cream cones all day. Please welcome Jeff.
All right, thank you very much. You might be wondering what pickles have to do with ice cream. Well, I've got 15 minutes, and I wanted to talk about pickles. Not really. I was actually thinking about decisions. Decision making can be really hard. It can be complicated, frustrating, confusing, and that made me think about one of my first sales calls early on in my career with General Mills. I was going down to Fredericktown, Missouri, and meeting with Jim Hamblin. I had a stack full of surveys, and he was sitting on his side of the desk. I was sitting on the other. Jim's flipping through the surveys one by one, not saying anything, which, to be honest, is kind of uncomfortable to begin with. Then he pulls one out. It's a Chex Mix survey, I think, and had a couple different flavors on it. He leans back in his chair and looks at it and says, "Jeff, if I only took one of these, which one would you recommend?" And I said, well, being the good salesperson that I was, I said, "Well, Jim, I'd recommend you take both of them, right?" And if you knew Jim, you knew that wasn't going to fly. Jim said, no, you need to recommend one of them. If you were to recommend one, which flavor would you recommend? Well, that actually made me pretty uncomfortable, because just between us, I wasn't really prepared for this sales call. I didn't know our product line really well, and I definitely didn't know the Southeast grocery consumer very well. So I sat there and thought, and came up with the best answer I had, which was really going with my gut. And I just said, well, Jim, I'd pick chocolate. And I was disappointed to give up the other flavor, but at the same time, I was relieved to just move on from that line of questioning and get off the hot seat. Unfortunately, Jim wasn't ready to move on, and he comes back and says, well, why chocolate? And now I'm really uncomfortable because I didn't have a good reason. And so finally, I just came clean and I said, well, Jim, chocolate's really everybody's favorite flavor, right? Like, if you're only going to take one, you should start with chocolate. It just makes sense. And that's when Jim told me a story that would stick with me to this day. And it was a story about pickles. He was a stalker at a grocery store. The store manager came to him and said, I want you to reset pickles. And apparently Jim loved pickles. So he really wanted to impress his boss. And he went and pulled everything off the shelf, cleaned the shelves, got them spick and span, put new tags up, put the pickles up, got it looking really nice. The store manager comes over, says, Jim, this looks fantastic. You did a great job. I do have one question. Why do bread and butter pickles have 11 facings? And Jim says, well, bread and butter pickles are the best. Everybody likes bread and butter pickles. Store manager says, well, Jim, maybe you love bread and butter pickles, but our customers love dill pickles. You know how I know that? Because dill pickles outsell bread and butter pickles 10-1. He said, if I fill all those facings with bread and butter pickles, by the time they go out of date, we'll throw half of them away. In the 18 months that I called on Jim, I always really appreciated him. He didn't always say yes. In fact, he probably said no as often as he said yes, and he was a tough sell. But at the same time, I really appreciated that he always took the time to explain the rationale behind his reasoning. He didn't just say no and send me out the door. He took the time to explain how our products related to his customers and challenged me to understand my product line better. So with this pickle story, he taught me 2 important things about serving others. And that's really what we're doing, right? We're serving our customers. Those 2 things have stuck with me ever since. The first is that taking the time to understand our consumer and our customer allows us to serve them better. And the second is that taking the time to understand our products helps us to know how they fit into the customer's lives. When you do those 2 things and you invest in those 2 things, something fantastic happens. Decision making becomes easier, faster, and a lot better. So that brings us to the market structure. And a few years ago, Wells was really expanding and growing, and realized that investing in our knowledge of the customer and our knowledge of the category would be critical to our success. There's so many decisions in every category, and ice cream's really no different. So we needed to be able to make decisions faster, easier, and more profitably. So we partnered with one of the industry's leading analytical research providers in Nielsen and developed the market structure. You might be asking what a market structure is. Maybe you guys all know. I didn't know what a market structure was initially. Maybe to oversimplify it a little bit, a market structure is very similar to a consumer decision tree. It shows us the path the customer takes in choosing which item they're going to purchase from the category. Where there's a difference between the market structure and the CDT is a consumer decision tree tells us how the consumer says they shop the section, whereas the market structure is really built on the actual purchase behavior of the customers. So what kind of things does a market structure tell us? Well, you can see I've got a picture here of one of those DVD bins. I don't know about you guys if you've seen those in the store. I used to get really excited by those. $3 for a movie sounds like a great deal. I'd run over there, start digging around. But I wouldn't spend more than maybe 30 seconds or a minute digging through those before I realized this thing is total chaos. There's no organization whatsoever. And it made the process frustrating. I don't think I've ever actually bought a DVD out of the DVD bin. And even worse, now when I see them in store, I just walk right past them. So, recent studies have shown that supermarket shoppers spend less than 5 seconds on average thinking about each purchase decision. And not only that, we know our shoppers bring a lot of outside stresses and frustrations, and that can make the process difficult for them as well. I don't know if you guys have ever shopped with one of these. I've shopped with 3 to 4 of them, and I can tell you they definitely add a lot of stress and pressure to the process. What the market structure does is it takes a large and highly diverse category like frozen ice cream, and it shows us how the consumer organizes their thoughts and their decision-making process. And then the way that we use that is by knowing how the consumer thinks. We have clear, simple principles to apply in setting our shelves to optimize the shopping experience for them, and in analyzing our own business to ensure that we're making the best decisions with our product mix. So the bottom line is, our customers inherently expect and need products to be intuitively presented and organized in alignment with their thought process. So as we go through the market structure, there's a few key findings that popped out that you'll see that are consistent throughout. And the first is that consumers have defining breaks in their decision process. So you can see below, as the consumer approaches the total ice cream and frozen treats category, the first choice they're going to make is between scoopable ice cream or handheld frozen treats. And once they make that choice, they'll have another set of choices, and we'll look at that here in a second. The next thing that stood out to us is the importance of brand. Now, we know brands are important. Obviously, manufacturers invest a lot in developing their brands. But what was a surprise to us was how consistently brand came up at a much higher level than we expected in the consumer's decision process. And then last, the interaction between Better For You and non-dairy. We initially expected a high interaction between these two, particularly with Better For You customers purchasing from non-dairy. But as you'll see, the way these two interact is very different in scoopables and in handheld. So that brings us to the actual output. Now, my goal in this presentation is to demonstrate how the ice cream market structure can make our decisions clear, simple, and meaningful to both our business and our customer. So let's put ourselves in the head of one of those customers and walk through the process with them. So as we mentioned before, the first choice here is scoopables or handheld. And it's really, do I want to eat it with a spoon? And if so, it's scoopables. Or do I want to hold it in my hand while I eat it? And that's a handheld. So let's say our consumer is looking at scoopables. The next decision is, again, pretty simple. Do I want something small or personal size, that's small scoopables? Or do I want something larger that is multiple servings, will be consumed over a longer period of time? If they choose larger, their very next concern is brand. And this was a surprise to us. We expected it to be pails or squares or scrounds, something like that. But actually, the consumer goes first in their mindset to brand, and then they look for the differentiation that they're hoping for within that brand. So how would we set up our category to align with the way our customer shops? Well, in large scoopables, we'd organize by brand first and then differentiation second within the brand. So we've got a picture of a planogram here. You can see we've got the brands blocked from left to right, and then we've got differentiation blocked within each of the brands. So we've got Belfonte there in the Belfonte block. We've got Blue Ribbon Classics in the Blue Ribbon Classics block. And we've got Best Choice, Pails, and Squares in the Best Choice block. So that's large scoopables. We're already 25% through the market structure. How about the small scoopables? The next decision for the consumer is, do I want better for you pints? Do I want non-dairy pints? Or do I want something indulgent? And here's where we saw a really interesting, I won't say interaction, lack of interaction between better for you and non-dairy. The better for you customer is really concerned about health claims, often calories, not so concerned about non-dairy. And the non-dairy consumer is obviously very concerned about their ice cream not having dairy in it. And they usually have health restrictions a lot of times that are driving that preference. For obvious reasons, the non-dairy consumer is not interested in purchasing better for you. And the better for you dairy customer also does not purchase from the non-dairy section. Then last, we have indulgent. And this consumer is looking for something that's going to fulfill every hope and dream they had for the ice cream that they purchased. They just want it to taste great. They're not worried about the calories. They're not worried about the consequences. We also found kind of an interesting sub-break here between pints and single serves. And this consumer is going to choose whether they want a single serve item or a pint. And then across all three, again, straight to brand and then differentiation within the brand. So how do we organize our set? We'll organize small scoopables by formulation first and then have brands broken out within. So here's an example of a planogram. We've got indulgent on the left, and then it flows into the indulgent pints flow into indulgent single serve, and then we have better for you and non-dairy on the right, and then within each of those three formulations, we have our brands blocked together. So we're now halfway through the market structure. That's scoopables. We'll now transition over to handheld. So this is someone who wants to hold their frozen treat in their hands while they eat it. The very next choice comes down to a single factor. Do I want ice cream in my frozen treat, or do I not want ice cream in my frozen treat? If it's ice cream, they're going to break to the ice cream treats side of this page. And then their choice comes down to the value tier and the brands associated with each of those value tiers. So I kind of hate that brand is below the value tier at this point, because the consumer associates brands so closely with the value tier that you could almost put them side by side. I guess it is appropriate to put it just below, but because this is how the consumer thinks about it. So they would choose like a mainstream, and then they would be looking for their preferred brand that they associate with mainstream. And then they look for the differentiation or the form within that. Historically, we would have looked at cones or bars or sandwiches first, and then evaluated brands within that. But according to the market structure, that's not how our consumer thinks about this section. They think about, they're looking for brand first, and then they make their choice on the different forms within that. So how would we organize this section? Well, first we're going to put ice cream treats separate from all other frozen treats. And then within ice cream treats, we're going to block by brand, each brand within its value tier first, and differentiation within that brand. And I'll show you that in a minute, but first we're going to flip over to all other frozen treats, and then we'll show you those two together. So all other, this is the consumer that doesn't want ice cream in their treat, and they're going to break to segment next. So we've got water ice and fudge bars, fruit and veg bars, water ice cups and shakes, yogurt bars, and mochi and bites. In all these segments, their first concern, once they've chosen their segment, is brand, with the exception of water ice and fudge bars. That consumer is very concerned about pack size and sugar content, and then they go to brand after that. So we would organize all other frozen treats, of course, again, separately from ice cream-based treats. We'd block the segments first, and then brand within each segment. And this is what it looks like in the planogram. We've got ice cream treats on the left, and the value tiers broken out. So we've got value and those brands blocked within, mainstream and those brands blocked within, premium, better for you. Then we transition over to all other frozen treats and yogurt bars, mochi and fruit bars, and water ice and fudge bars, and water ice cups. And that brings us to the last slide. I hope I've been able to demonstrate how a market structure can make our decisions quicker, easier, and geared towards our customers' needs. We've emphasized the shelf set because it directly impacts the customer. And visually, it's a lot easier to demonstrate in a PowerPoint presentation pretty concisely. We only had 15, maybe 20 minutes here. I spent 7 of them talking about pickles, so we needed to get through this quickly. But I do want to re-emphasize the value that this brings to our analytical approach to the business as well. By organizing our analysis according to how our customers shop, we're better able to ensure that we're evaluating our product offerings according to how they actually compete for our customers' purchase decisions. And this can help us better, and this can help make us better and more productive in our decisions around merchandising, pricing, distribution, really across the board. So to recap, the consumer is going to approach the ice cream and frozen treats section or aisle with one decision in mind. Do I want something I can scoop and eat with a spoon, or do I want something I eat while I hold it in my hand? If it's something with a spoon, they're going to break to the left side of this slide. We're going to block our brands, and they're going to choose between large scoopables and small scoopables. If they choose large, we're going to block by brands first, and then differentiation within each of those brands. If they choose small, we're going to block by formulation first, and then block brands within formulation. On the other hand, if they go with handheld, they're either going to choose ice cream based or all other. If they choose ice cream based, we're going to block by tier, by value tier first, and then the associated brands within each second. And if they choose all other frozen treats, we're going to block by segment first, and then brands within each segment. So to close, I'll just repeat myself, I guess, again, and just say knowing our categories, knowing our customer makes our decisions easier, better, and a lot more profitable. So let's invest together in our customers. Let's invest in our products. And on behalf of my old friend Jim, I'll add a third. Let's invest in the people around us. Because whether it's pickles or ice cream or people, the investments we make today will pay dividends for days, weeks, and years to come. Thank you, guys. I don't know what to do now. Yeah, do you guys have any questions? I was told if I used 20 minutes, I wasn't going to be allowed question time.
I don't, Jim Campbell, you are absolutely correct. That's when I was buying sugar bombs.
That's the Jim.